stuff.
Okay, so I know Sega had a lot of issues with the Sega Saturn, but with ads like that, they kind of weren't helping out their case. Anyway, good evening, guys. Hope you all had a good work week. If you guys haven't guessed by now, we're headed back into Sonics tonight, taking a look at another batch of spin-offs for the series. So, we're still in what I refer to as Sonic's initial blank period. This is the time period between 1994 and 1999, when there was no mainline Sonic game. Last time we looked at all the games that came out on the Game Gear, most of which were okay, but pretty subpar, all things considered. And tonight is probably going to be a little more interesting for a lot of people, because we're going to be looking into some of the more obscure games in the series, and that's primarily due with the fact that Sonic's time in the 32-bit era was just very, very strange, due to a lot of just issues going on at Sega at the time. Sega just had the hardest time getting a proper 3D Sonic game out the door, which was the style of the time. This was the start of the 3D revolution. So, a lot of the games we're going to be looking at tonight are definitely some of the stranger, rarer, and more elusive Sonic games that have come out over the years. Even today, they're still very weird, very strange. So what we're going to be playing tonight is Knuckles Chaotix, Sonic 3D Blast, the 32X version, Sonic R, Sonic the Fighters, and Sonic Jam. If any of you are new to this style of video, essentially how this works is I start a game and I play it for about 10 minutes or so, and then once the 10 minutes are up, I look at the next game. It's just a good rapid-fire way to get these spin-offs out the door, because a lot of them aren't worth dedicating a full hour to, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be doing tonight. And if you enjoyed tonight's content, be sure you like and subscribe, because I've noticed that my videos are starting to get consistent 30 views, and I still only have 14 subscribers. So if you aren't subscribed to the channel and you're still watching my stuff, be sure to like and subscribe, because it does help the channel out. So anyway, first up on our list of games tonight is Knuckles Chaotix. This game was released in, when was it? 1995. And initially it started out as a game for the Sega Genesis. In America at the time, the Sega Genesis was still doing very well. This was due to a price drop and the fact they had started packaging Sonic as the packing title. So the Sega Genesis was still doing well, and at that point there were 3 Sonic games in development. There was Sonic 4, which would eventually become what we know as Sonic 3D Blast. There was Sonic Crackers, which was more of an experiment than anything. I don't think it was ever supposed to be a Sonic game. And even a game based on Sat AM, if you can believe it or not. But over in Japan, the story was different. The Sega Genesis was on decline, and Sega of Japan was looking to the future. So they were looking for a stopgap, like an in-between console, because they wanted to move on to a dedicated 32-bit machine, but they didn't actually have something they were ready to release at the time. They were just in the prototyping stages, but they wanted to get a head start on things, primarily because the Atari Jaguar was coming out. Was the Atari Jaguar? It was a piece of crap that no one remembers, so right there is a little bit of foolishness. So, Sega of America didn't want it. The Genesis was still doing well. They didn't need a stopgap, and they were able to talk Sega of Japan out of doing an in-between console and talk them down to an add-on, but it was still ill-advised from the start. But because Sega of Japan demanded it, Sega of America did what they were told and moved a couple of Sonic games to the 32X. So they moved Sonic 4 to the system, and it also moved Sonic Crackers to the system. Now, Sonic Crackers would eventually become a Knuckles spin-off called Knuckles Chaotix, but it ended up doing very poorly, primarily because it was on the 32X. Though there was a lot of hype for the 32X initially, When, like, just a few months out from release, Sega Japan announced the Sega Saturn, and by the time the 32X came out, the Sega Saturn was already out in Japan, so you had two types of people here. You had those who realized what was going on and that the 32X would be abandoned pretty quickly, or you had people who didn't realize what was going on and would end up buying the 32X, and it would just be a complete disaster because it would affect the sales of both consoles. The people who bought a Saturn obviously didn't buy the 32X, and the people who bought the 32X suddenly couldn't afford to buy the Sega Saturn, so it cut into both console markets. It was just a complete waste of time, and it really hurt Sega's brand as well. They looked greedy, which a Sega of America rep put best. He couldn't imagine people looking at them back in those days. They used to be the cool kids. So as a result, Knuckles Chaotix has become one of the more elusive games in the Sonic series. It's never been re-released on any collection, at least not to my knowledge. And probably for good reason, because it's not very good, honestly. Last time I played this was back in 2016 when I did a retrospective over Moment Blog. And it just did not stand out to me, outside of the fact that it was just one of the more rare and elusive Sonic games. And because it's so rare and elusive and not very good, I have opted out of purchasing a Genesis, purchasing the 32X, purchasing all the cables that go with it, and a copy of Knuckles Chaotix, which for the record is very hard to find, and I'm just going to use an emulator to just show it to you guys tonight. But anyway, I feel like I've talked enough, so we're going to go ahead and play. Excuse me, guys. I'm getting over a little bit of a cold tonight. So, here we go. It's really nice that this Genesis emulator can do 32X games. Makes things very convenient. Make sure my sound capture is still working correctly. I had issues with that last week. Yeah, we're good. Well, this looks promising. It's really impressive graphics for the time. It really demonstrates the console's sprite scaling capabilities. And dude, that is a sick title screen. There's just so much life there, and the animation and detail on the characters is amazing. One thing I did notice when I was recording footage for this, though, is that the title screen just says Chaotix, but on the box art and the label itself, it says Knuckles Chaotix. I have a hunch that this was supposed to be a Chaotix headline game that sort of had Knuckles added to it at the last minute so it'd have a little more marquee value. Knuckles was really popular at the time, as shown by this. It says Sonic and Knuckles. Not a big fan of these menus though, they're a little overdone. Okay, so this doesn't look too bad. Control's a little sluggish though, it doesn't feel as... like, Knuckles' acceleration is really low. Sort of the opposite that most bad Sonic games have, where the control isn't necessarily bad, but like, instead of accelerating too fast, Knuckles accelerates too slow here, which is a bit of a problem. And now we get into our big... oh. Okay, that looks really silly, doesn't it? And this is just a little tutorial, so I'm gonna skip this, just get right into the game. Okay, so you may have noticed that Espio there isn't following Knuckles around in the same manner that, say, Tails does in the Sonic 2. And the reason for that is the partner system in this game doesn't work the same way as it does in other Sonic games. As you can see, I'm sort of attached to the character via a rubber band. And that's sort of the main gameplay gimmick of Knuckles Chaotix, using the two characters to sort of manipulate that. So right here I build up the kinetic energy, I let off, and suddenly I built up speed. My god, that music is starting to get on my nerves. Jeez, what is up with that? Ugh. Now, it does seem like an interesting concept, all things considered, but as you can see, it's a little cumbersome. Like, because you don't have any real direct control over your side character, they just kind of do what they want, and that can really screw with your own control. Like, having to place him in that specific spot in order to do something. And as you can saw there, remembering to let go of the right button so you don't go the wrong way. It just feels a little messy. And the music sounds alright, but there's this annoying buzzing noise that's starting to get on my nerves. And what the heck is going on here? You can still climb on walls, so you can at least do that. And the different characters in the game do have different abilities. Espio, for example, he can actually run up walls, and I think he can climb them faster than any other character. And there are other characters you can play as other than Knuckles and Espio. But how you select them is also a bit of a pain, as I'll show you here soon, once I get through this initial level. See, he's just bouncing there. There's no button to recall him or anything. Well, there is, but... See, he's just slightly off space, and that's screwing me up. Something else you might have noticed is that there's a little bit of verticality to the levels here. And that's part of the problem with Knuckles Chaotix. A lot of the levels in this game are designed in that manner specifically. And as a result, a lot of it can feel very samey. Really, the way the levels work in this game are a little strange. Rather than just going from act to act, when you get to the main game, you know, level select screen, there's a level randomizer that you use, and it picks a level for you. And that might sound like a bad thing, because there's a chance you could, you know, pick a level that you don't want, and now I'm small, that's a very annoying power-up. But when it picks a level you've already been to, you go to the next act, so... Like, there isn't really a flow to this game, it's just very odd. I'm not exactly sure what the thought process here was. Honestly, I'm starting to get a little confused. That's the way I came, isn't it? This is getting old. People get so excited to play Knuckles Chaotix, and then they actually start playing it and realize that there's a reason Sega has never re-released it. Because what you're doing here, this is what you do for most of the game. There just isn't a whole lot to it. Now I'm suddenly in control of Espio. Okay, I will admit though, these special stages are pretty cool. It's very primitive 3D, but, you know, This was the era of 3D. This is what people wanted to see in games at the time, especially on the 32X. That was one of the big touted features of the console, that it could do very primitive 3D. Though I'm not sure why you needed a full add-on for that, when a chip just does just fine, as Nintendo demonstrated. Man, Sega was making a lot of dumb decisions at the time. So you're basically just trying to get the blue orbs. It's not hard, and it's honestly pretty easy. That background is really cool though, look at all that. Say what you will about the 32X, but it was rocking that power for the time. It's a shame it was obsolete by the time it came out, with the 32X coming out, with the Saturn, PlayStation, and the N64 on the way. It's really silly of Sega to be worried about the Atari Jaguar too, considering what a dumpster fire that would be. I'd say that was an even bigger dumpster fire than the Sega Saturn. I can't believe I'm making that connection. I guess it didn't explain what the plot here is. Essentially, Knuckles discovers a place called Carnival Island and goes to investigate and discovers that Eggman set up shop. And he's looking for these things called the Chaos Rings, which has the ability to summon the Master Emerald. So, of course, he and the group of treasure hunters who are also on the island called the Chaotix have showed up. We're almost done with this game, so might as well look through all the characters that are here before we call it. So you also got Mighty the Armadillo, who's making his second appearance from the Sonic arcade game. Not sure why Ray's not here. I guess Mighty left him at home. This would also be his last appearance until Sonic Mania Plus. Man, my throat is starting to get on my nerves. Espio the Chameleon, as we saw before, Charming Vector. All three of them making their first appearance, and I'm glad they were introduced because those are three of my favorite characters in the modern canon. Now, why don't we play a little bit more? I think I'm gonna be Vector. He's walking with a lot of swagger, isn't he? Okay, so this is how you pick your character. Or pick. It's completely random. So I got Knuckles. So you basically have to get lucky to get what you want. And I have to ask, what was wrong with the character select screen? Like, I guess the idea was by doing this, you would be encouraged to try out more of the characters. But if you have multiple characters to play as, you have replay value. You do this, you kind of take that away, and there's not much here to begin with, so why are you doing that? And as I said here, this is how you pick your level. So you just jump in this thing. And that's the level you go to, and while they might all look different, they all basically have the same theme, so don't get too excited. It really just feels like one big level more than anything. And that's where we're gonna call it with Knuckles Chaotix. So again, Knuckles Chaotix, it's just not very good, all things considered. I mean, the concept behind it actually does have some potential, but like they were sort of at odds with, you know, making a Sonic game as well. So I'm not sure they really thought about that, but like they just obviously didn't think hard enough with it. And again, it's just become such a rare and elusive game. It's really only recommended to people like me who are huge fans of the series and just want to say that they played it all. So, On the 32X, obviously that wasn't going to go anywhere. So you're probably wondering, what happened to Sonic 4? Didn't you say that moved to the Sega 32X as well? Well, it did. Let me see if I can pull up some footage of what it looked like real quick. So, yeah, you can see some of the stuff I watch here on YouTube. So, Sonic 32X. So this is essentially what it would have looked like. So yeah, obviously that wasn't looking terribly good. So after that, it came the Sega Saturn. So Sega ordered the Sega Technical Institute, who were the guys working on this game, to move the game to the Sega Saturn. So based on the fact that they swapped 3 different consoles already, you're probably saying, like, could that possibly get any worse? Oh, holy crap. Could it get a lot worse? So, what happened next was the start of Sonic Extreme, which was intended to be the big Sonic game for the 32X. Unfortunately, everything that you can think of that can go wrong with game development happened with Sonic Extreme. For starters, the team was poorly managed. They were very inexperienced with 3D graphics, so that wasn't very good. They had an immovable release date. They wanted it out by the holiday of 1996, I think. And on top of all that, they were sort of being sabotaged by Sega of Japan as well. And part of the reason for that was because there was just so much disagreement over the Saturn. It was primarily built for the Japanese audience, and over there in Japan it did do well, but here in America, not so much, and Sega of America disagreed about putting their full weight behind it. And eventually, 2 of the main leads on the development side had to go to the hospital. Supposedly one of them was even diagnosed with a terminal illness and only had so much time to live. From what I hear, was a misdiagnosis. I don't know if it's true or not, but thank Lifeson. But with the game physically hurting people, Sega had no choice but to cancel it at that point. But that was a problem because that left them without a game to release for the holiday season that year. So they got in touch with Traveler's Tales, who you remember from the last video I did on Sonic, were the guys who sort of picked up the pieces on the Genesis version of Sonic 4 and turned it into Sonic 3D Blast. So Sega contacted them and asked if they could do a quick and dirty port of the game for the 32X, which they did, and they were able to get out the door in time. Say what you will about Traveler's Tales, but they do work fast and efficiently. You would think that there wouldn't be a point to looking at the 32X version of Sonic 3D Blast, but this game, and it is basically the same game as the Genesis version, but it's also got a few bells and whistles that do make it the definitive version of 3D Blast. It's also, again, an elusive title in the series because while Sega has released Sonic 3D Blast, the Genesis version, like half a dozen times, they haven't done so with this version of Sonic for whatever reason. I can't tell you why, but because of that, we're going to have to play it on my Sega Saturn. So let's go ahead and boot this up. Make sure I have the right control. And yes, I do have an action replay hooked up to this. That's how you bypass region lock on this piece of junk. I'm used to being greeted with Sega. Traveler's Tales. Not a mark of quality, but at least a mark of a team that can get it done. Oh, now this is something. Actual intro? Kind of reminds me of the intro in Sonic Adventure. Good sense of speed there. That render of Sonic is a little silly though, primarily because he's always smiling. Oh, off to a pretty good start with that. That's a good intro. Load times are a little long though, but that's early CD games for you. And the title screen's even been improved. The sky background's a lot better, and that music, I think that's in Sonic Transform. I do recognize that from somewhere. Alright. Yeah, they couldn't resist showing off the 3D with the menu screen, could they? It's even got a map screen, because why not? And the Flicky Island's kind of a mess, isn't it? Yeah, some really long load times. That's the only thing that's worse about this game compared to the Genesis version. Well, this is certainly a marked improvement on the Genesis, isn't it? There's a lot more color, there's a nice animation. That water looks good. Holy crap, that even... Oh, dude, that's really cool looking. I recognize this loop right here. Yeah, the level design is the same, but the graphics have seen a nice update. I mean, Sonic's character model even looks better. Something I was hoping to do with this game was actually play with the Sega 3D control. I actually did manage to get my hands on one. What I'm talking about is, this is what a typical Sega Saturn control looks like. And this beast is the 3D control. Unfortunately, the one I got, the plug is messed up, so I had to order a new one, and it didn't arrive in time for the video, so that's a bit of a bummer. But this isn't the last time we're going to be looking at a Sega Saturn game, so not a huge deal. And just like when I played the Genesis game, Sonic disappears into the shield. That's a little annoying. But then he reappears. That's a little finicky. I did get my game secondhand, obviously, so maybe it's just an issue with it. Maybe there's a scratch, I don't know. I really like the music, too. It's not as memorable as the Genesis game, but it's still pretty damn good. Just need one more ring so I can show you guys the special stage. Wait, is that guy animated? Holy crap, he's animated. That's neat. Jump up here. Let's go have a word with the Rad Red. Can you help us find the Chaos Emerald there, buddy? And now a loading screen. Wonderful. Yeah, you can tell they kind of rushed this through development because these load times should not be this long. And this right here is pretty spectacular for the time. Like, the 32X was not the 32X. The Sega Saturn was notorious for its inability to push polygons, but this actually looks pretty good, doesn't it? I really like Sonic's 32-bit character model. You still got the same general vibe of the character. He's very recognizable, but he's clearly been designed with the hardware in mind. It just looks really good. And you know what? One of the things I always questioned with Sonic Extreme is you saw the gameplay footage, that weird fisheye stuff they were doing. It was very clear that they were overthinking how to do Sonic in 3D, but like the general idea is right here. All you had to do was just put the camera behind Sonic and have him run forward. I mean, like, that was the first thing Naughty Dog came up with when they were making a 3D game. That's where they got the idea for Crash Bandicoot. in that game entered development, it was referred to as Sonic's ass game. Part of my French. But yeah, if they had just done something like this, they probably could have sold it. You know, just make the level design a little more varied. And yeah, this looks really good, dude. For the 32X at least. Why do I keep saying that? It's a Sega Saturn. That emerald just looks majestic, doesn't it? It's crazy to think that Traveler's Tales were able to put that out so quickly. They really knew how to work that hardware, didn't they? Okay, why is there no music? How about a dun 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 dun? You know, make me feel like I accomplished something. You gotta enjoy the little things, you know. Enough with the loading times. Seriously, Sega, release this on PC and iron out the loading times, for crying out loud. It can't be that hard to do. Hell, how Traveler's Tales to do it? They could probably do it like that. Ah. Screwed that up. Get over here, you stupid bird. I think I just saw some... Oh, look at the little monkey climbing the palm tree. That's adorable. Like, just all the little details that they were able to pack into the backgrounds. I mean, they were definitely taking advantage of that 32-bit hardware here. I mean, I guess not. I mean, this isn't what people wanted to see at the time. They wanted to see a bona fide 3D Sonic game. But you can definitely see how effective the 32X was with 2D graphics at the time. Like I said, it is still the same game as 3D Blast on the Genesis. Just run around the levels, find the enemies, defeat them, get the flickies, you know, that whole song and dance. Doesn't do anything different, but what were you expecting? Really, I feel like this is going to be more of a lie for Saturn fans than it was for Genesis fans. Because with the Saturn, you probably are expecting a full 3D Sonic game. Whereas on the Genesis, it would be a miracle if it was in 3D at all. I think the control is better in general than the Genesis version too. It feels just a little bit more polished. And again, the music is really good. Definitely taking advantage of the CD format. Still think that's one of the guys from Crush 40 adding some of his music first. Dude really was a good composer. I think he's lost his touch though. His contributions to recent Sonic games haven't been terribly good. The soundtrack in Superstars was just so freaking bland, dude. Just let the man do what he does best, some rock and roll. Okay, I'm missing someone. Probably back this way. Yep. Finish this level and then we'll move on to the next game. Here we go. Man, I lost a flicky. Now I have to go back through this whole freaking level and find the darn thing. Where are you? There you are, you little bugger. There's something that's floating around, Sonic 3D Blast Director's Cut, which was something that one of the programmers on this game went back to in his spare time. And one of the things he added was a tracker, so if you lose a flicky, you can find it more easily. Like, I don't know why Sega doesn't endorse that. That's really cool. See, there, I feel like I accomplished something. It's amazing what a music cue can do for you. But anyway, that's Sonic 3D Blast on the 32X. Again, 32X, I'm talking about the Sega Saturn, it's so confusing. Anyway, 3D Blast on the Saturn, and it is really interesting to play. It's like a Super Ultra Mega Dip Director's Cut of Sonic 3D Blast. And I don't know why Sega is so content with just, letting this one sit in obscurity. Like, again, just release it on PC. It can't be that hard. The developer is willing to put time on it, so why aren't you, Sega? And then again, I don't really think there's demand for this game. Like, not as much as Knuckles Chaotix, at least, because a lot of people would just think that this is Sonic 3D Blast, but on the Saturn. But it does have a lot of nice bells and whistles. The music is great, the graphics are better, and the special stages are really cool. So, yeah, worth it if you got a Sega Saturn. Alright, so now I'm going to turn this off, and now I'm going to put in the next game we're going to be playing tonight, which is Sonic Jam, which is one I'm sure a lot of people are excited for me to showcase here. Because I think a lot of the fan base are misinformed on what Sonic Jam is, primarily due to Mega Collection. It's which sort of presented it as this obscure 3D Sonic game that predates Sonic Adventure. But that's not exactly what it is. It is something else completely, and not in a good way. And I think it would be easier for me just to show you, but you're going to have to bear with me for a second because my Saturn, its battery is dead, so I gotta click through a couple of screens here. No, hey, level Lifeson. Essentially, the battery in my console is dead, so it doesn't save the time anymore. I need to get that replaced. I'm surprised my guy at Software Seconds didn't have that already in there when he sold it to me. And I'm praying this thing works because this game is not in the best condition, so looks like it's working. Oh yeah, Sonic Team. I forgot all about them. So you're probably wondering, where have they been this whole time? Well, short answer, they were working on Knights. I love Knights, but the Sega needed a Sonic game more than they needed Knights. That's a pretty good render of Sonic. Bit more organic than the 3D Blast one. I'm a little iffy on the title though. Like, the title Sonic Jam makes me think more of music than anything. I wonder how many people mistook this for like a Sonic album or something. Push the start button, didn't I? No, I did not, but that sort of exposes what this is, doesn't it? Okay, so essentially after Nights into Dreams, Sega basically told Sonic Team, look guys, Nights was great, we know you guys really wanted to work on that game, but we need a Sonic game and we need it now. So they began prototyping a Sonic game for the Sega Saturn, but it became very clear that they weren't going to have anything concrete in time for their deadline. So they figured it would be easier just to do a compilation of all the Genesis games. But these aren't just emulated ports of the game either. These are actually ground-up remakes of the game, created with the 32X game, the Sega Saturn's hardware. So all those graphical glitches that you remember from the Sonic games, they're all gone, which is really cool. Like, usually Sega just emulates the games, but here you actually have them updated a little bit. That's really cool. So you got Sonic Genesis, Sonic 2, Sonic 3, and Sonic and Knuckles. Now, it might be annoying that these two are separate, but if you actually click on one of these things, you'll see that you can actually use the lock-on feature, so you can plug in Sonic 3, get the full Sonic 3 experience. You can play Sonic 2 and Knuckles, and you can even do the Blue Sphere stuff. Unfortunately, like I said, my copy is rough, so every time I try to do one of these, the game crashes, unfortunately, but I know for a fact it does work. My console is just, on the fritz. So, another cool aspect of these games is you not only have different difficulty sections, but you also have a time attack, allowing you to play through any of the stages you want, trying to get the best time, and even access to all the special stages. So it's a lot of bells and whistles, and you can even use the spin dash in Sonic 1. So yeah, some really good updates here. But again, that's just not what people wanted on the 32X at the time. They wanted a 3D Sonic game, and a compilation of all the Genesis games. Like, why? The people who bought a Saturn are the people who had a Genesis, and if they had a Genesis, they probably had the Sonic games. So, what makes you think they want to buy this? So, I love the thought, but it just was not what was needed. But I'm sure this is what you guys are curious about. And this is probably what Sonic Jam is most famous for. So this right here, what you are looking at is the prototype for the original Sonic Adventure. And you know what? As a showpiece for what Sonic could have been on the Sega Saturn, this is actually really cool. What this basically is just a glorified extras menu. So you go up to these different places and you can do stuff like watch movies, look at concept art, read about the characters. There's even some minor missions here, like collecting rings, getting these posts. Tails is flying around here. I mean, this looks really good, doesn't it? I mean, well, not really good. It is a 3D game on the Sega Saturn. But for what I'm used to seeing on the Sega Saturn, this is just fantastic. They even got Sonic's trademark idle animation. That's just fantastic. It is a little awkward to control, though. Again, I am using a D-pad, and I expect it controls better with the 3D control. And while this is a nice novelty, it just doesn't last very long. I remember getting this to see if it worked, and I just kind of got bored with it really quickly. You can only run around a 3D area without many objectives for so long. But yeah, this is basically what Sonic Jam amounts to. It's basically just a fun little collection of, Sonic's 16-bit outings. It's not bad, it's not great, it's just... Actually, you know what? There's no point owning Sonic Jam anymore. We got so many different compilations featuring these games, and while there are some updates to the versions included in Sonic Jam, you're just better off getting the more recent updates. Like, it's Sonic Origins. I mean, they screwed up the version of Sonic 3, but I actually found that there's a lot of people who preferred that version of Sonic 3 because it adds the drop dash. So, yeah, I didn't even think about that when I did my Sonic 3 video. But yeah, that's all Sonic Jam is. I'm sure you guys were hoping for a little bit more, but there really is just not much to say about this game. So that does it for the Sega Saturn tonight. So the next couple of games that I'm going to be looking at here are going to be on Sonic Gems, because I didn't feel like running down a Sega Saturn copy of the next game we're going to be playing. And it's also the only legit way I can play the last game we're going to be talking about tonight. And I need to restart my capture software, which happens from time to time. Alright, so there we go. That's weird, the music stopped, but that's good for me. It's easier to talk about. So, anyway, so Sonic 3D Blast and Sonic Jam, I'm sure they made Sega a couple of bucks, but with the way things are going with the Saturn, they needed more than a couple of bucks. Like I said, the game was doing really well. The Sega Saturn was doing very well in Japan because, again, it was designed for that market. Arcades are still very popular over there, so you could just throw a bunch of arcade points onto the thing and you could call it a day. But you couldn't do that in America. People didn't care about that. They wanted deeper, more complex experiences, which the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64 were giving players at the time. The Sega Saturn just had very little offer in comparison. So they needed more star power on the console. So Sega again got in touch with Traveler's Tales and asked if they could produce a Sonic game for them. Again, they had a very tight deadline on it. So what they decided to do was essentially take a Formula One racing concept that they had, a game engine that they had prototyped, and sort of repurpose that into a Sonic game. And you had a Sonic team actually helping them this time with art design, stuff like that. So you would think that this would be like the 3D Sonic game we're waiting for, right? I mean, you have Sonic Team and Traveler's Tales, who had both had success on the Saturn, so this must be the one, right? No. Honestly, like, Sonic R is widely regarded as one of the absolute worst games in the series. Screw Attack even named it the worst. I wouldn't go that far. I don't think Sonic R is that bad. Then again, I just have a lot of nostalgia for this game. I think this was the first Sonic game I ever owned, actually. So I did play it a lot growing up. But yeah, the more I think about it, it is the kind of game that's hard to defend as good. But rather than talk about it, let's just go ahead and play. My sound's still coming in good. Yeah, I just lost my headphones. That's not good. 1 second, guys. Damn headphones. Let's see. Whoa, this is embarrassing. Hold on a sec, let me try restarting the capture software, see if that fixes the sound. There we go. Game capture is not coming through though. Need to get that game capture in there so you guys don't pick up the feedback as much. Oh, great. See, can you guys even hear this? I guess that's all I have to do for now. Sorry about that, guys. I could have swore my headphones were charged. Hey, let's go ahead and take a look at this. Okay, so one thing I will say, this title screen is great, but the more I look at it, not really, because rather than your attention being put on the title itself, you're sort of drawn to everyone else. You got Sonic, Knuckles, Tails. Like, the title just kind of gets lost in it, and the name Sonic R doesn't really tell you a whole lot, does it? That music is great too. That's engraved in my memory from my childhood. The title itself is sort of drawn. Okay, so we got a menu, Grand Prix, Time Attack, Multiplayer, which actually does have some decent options to it, and some options. It probably is worth mentioning that the version of the game that's available on the Sonic Gems collection is actually the PC version of the game. Both the 3D Blast and Sonic R were released on the PC at some point. And they're actually, in the case of Sonic R, it is superior. The graphics are better. And there are some added features such as weather effects. So if you're going to play Sonic R, I would definitely get the Sonic Gems collection because it is the better version of the game. So let's go ahead and get started with the Grand Prix. So from the start, you only have 4 characters. You got Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, but you'll unlock Eggman, eventually Metal Sonic, the Tails doll, Mecha Sonic, and an Egg Robo, and eventually Super Sonic 2. And one of the biggest issues with Sonic R is this game has some enormous balancing issues. So first of all, Sonic and Tails and Knuckles are your only options right out of the gate. Amy, she has the ability to hover over water, meaning that she can take a lot of shortcuts, but that only does so much for her when she's so slow. The same goes for Eggman, though he doesn't have the speed boost that Amy has as well. Metal Sonic and Mecha Sonic, Mecha Knuckles, they're okay, but the Tails doll and Egg Robo just suck. Like, it's so hard to win with those characters. And Super Sonic, holy crap, talk about broken. If you play as Super Sonic, you win. That's all there is to it. You win if you play as Super Sonic. So let's go ahead. I will say this though, the character models do look pretty good for the Saturn. Knuckles looks a little funny, and Amy looks a little silly, but Sonic looks alright. Again, I really do like that 32-bit character model of his. And then we get to the tracks. For the love of frickin' Lifeson. Get to the course selection. So, looking at all of this, you might be thinking, oh, well, these are cups, right? A series of races? Nope. This is it. This is all the levels in the game. You only have 5. For reference, Mario Kart 64, which obviously I think this game was trying to emulate to some degree, had, what was it? 16 tracks. This game only has 5. Well, let's at least see if the game is fun to play. Oh, I can tell you this, the graphics are certainly good. I do like how you can get a head start by doing the spin dash, that's really cool. And I will say that about Sonic R, I do like the concept here. The idea of an on-foot Sonic racing game is a good idea. And you know what? Again, it is what I would expect from a 3D Sonic game. Putting the camera behind Sonic and just having him run forward. A decent degree of speed too. I mean, it's not going to blow anyone's mind, but it runs pretty well. Sonic moves at a brisk pace. It's not bad. I know a lot of people like to harp on the controls, and to some degree, I do get that. They're probably trying to play the game like a Sonic Adventure or Sonic Adventure, 3D Sonic game. But it's more intended to be a racing game, so if you treat Sonic more like a car that can jump, the controls do make a little more sense. But you can sort of tell I'm really good at this game because I'm starting to lap the other characters. Wait, Knuckles, did you actually lose to Eggman? Holy crap. One thing I didn't think about until I was actually looking at this game for just to get my thoughts together, though I've been pretty scatterbrained most of the night, is that when you cross the finish line, you just kind of do. Like when I think of all my favorite racing games, like F-Zero, Mario Kart, or something like that, when you cross the finish line, like it's usually an event, like usually accompanied by a loud finish, and then like an image of the character celebrating as they take a victory lap. But with this, you cross the finish line, then it just cuts to everyone at the finish line celebrating if they won or lost. It's just not that satisfying to win in Sonic R. It is kind of lame that you're booted back to the title screen. Do a few more tracks, and then we'll move on to the last game. Used to find it really amusing that Tails did that when I was a kid. So, 3D graphics here are pretty good, but the music is something that gets a lot of mixed opinions, and I do understand that too because it is pretty corny stuff. A lot of people say that the soundtrack here is just absolutely awful, but to be honest, I've always been kind of a fan of it. Now, don't get me wrong, it is not the kind of music I would associate with Tails, and it's probably because I just listened to this music so much growing up. But it just always stuck with me. It's not a good fit for the series, or really the game in general, but it is memorable. And that's one thing I've always said in defense of Sonic R. Like, when I think of really bad Sonic games, like, I usually think of something like Shadow the Hedgehog, or Sonic Unleashed, or Sonic Forces, or that game that came out in 2016 I don't want to talk about. Not 2016, 2006 I don't want to talk about. Sonic R is something I usually think of when I think of bad Sonic games. But at the same time, it's kind of fun to play because of how bad it is. Like, I know I'm making this game look easy, but for a beginner, it probably would be really awkward to play. But when you do master it, like, it just becomes piss easy. I mean, look how far ahead I am of everyone. I remember playing this as a kid and having a hard time passing Knuckles. But I'm not having any issues here. I just got shot by Eggman there, that's what that was. Though I'm not sure how that's going to help him. And the different weather effects do affect how you handle too. Like, the rain here is making the floor a little slippery. Nothing to it. We'll do one more race and then we're going to do the last game of the night. You know what, just to challenge myself, I'm going to try to do this last race as Amy. Well, I definitely got a head start there. I'm not sure how that happened, though. I didn't mean to do that. Yeah, they're all going that way, but I'm taking a shortcut. So this is the only level I can think of where the controls actually start to become a real problem, and that's primarily because it expects you to do hairpin turns. It's important to note that the game was primarily handled by Traveler's Tales, and Sonic Team really just handled level design and art assets. And you can sort of tell that they were very hands-off in development because this level right here I don't think was really designed with how the game was intended to be played. Like, usually with level design, in order to make sure it works the way it's supposed to, what you want to do is figure out how your character moves, and then you want to design it based on that. And with this level in particular, it's just clear there's a disconnect. But I'm playing as Amy in a car, and I'm still doing pretty well, aren't I? Then again, the CPU is pretty dumb, so whatever. Knuckles, what are you doing? You're not supposed to go this way. And that's another win for me. Even if I handicap myself, the game can't win. And really, if I kept going, I probably would be able to finish the game with still plenty of time to meet the 130-minute max that I usually have for these videos, but I don't want to keep you guys watching for too long, so Sonic R, it's bad. There's no way around it, but again, it's not that bad. Again, there are some positives. The graphics here are actually really good for the time. The music, it's a terrible fit for Sonic, but it is still really fun to listen to. And it doesn't play as badly as people think it is. Like, once you get used to it, adjust to the crap factor, I think you could say, it actually does become kind of fun to blaze through, especially if you get a couple people who know what they're doing. But like, its biggest issue is that there's just so little content on offer here. Like, 5 stages, I mean, it's just pathetic. And while it is better in multiplayer because you do have extra modes like balloon hunts and tag, which sort of expects you to explore the levels, which is a smart use of it, it still doesn't compare to Mario Kart, Diddy Kong Racing, or Crash Team Racing, which this game was clearly trying to compete with, and not even, it wasn't even a contest. And again, lots of balancing issues with the characters too. Not a great game, but it's kind of fun to play because of how bad it is. I have a soft spot for it, I will admit. But anyway, let's go ahead and close out this game and get to our last game of the night, which is Sonic the Fighters. Now, it's probably important to note that so far I've been playing these games in the order they were released, but Sonic the Fighters actually predates all of these games. How the game came about was the team behind Fighting Vipers, in order to get used to the 3D graphics that they were having to work with, decided to make some 3D renders of Sonic characters, and they showed them to the team at Sonic Team, and they gave them the green light to make a 3D Sonic fighting game. So the game would come out, and while I think it was common in Japan, it was sort of rare here in the United States. And while a Saturn port was planned, it never came out, probably due to the fact that the Saturn was just bombing so hard, and after a bunch of weird spin-offs on the console, they probably didn't think that there was a point to porting Sonic the Fighters to it. So this game would be pretty rare for the series up until the release of Sonic Gems Collection, and would even be released as a standalone game on the PS3 and Xbox 360, if you can believe it or not. But anyway, this is the last game we're going to play tonight, so let's go ahead and check it out. Anyway, this is the last game. Okay, so right off the bat, these are some pretty good graphics. obviously it's not weighed down by like just the absurdly poor system architecture of the Sega Saturn. And this was actually Sonic's first appearance in full 3D too, even before Sonic Jam, or any of the games we played tonight, and it does look pretty good. And that does look like Sonic. It's even better than this Sega Saturn model. But one of the problems I have with this right away is the music. There's an art to sound design in an arcade game. Essentially, you want to design it so it's as distinct as possible so that you can pick out what game it is as soon as you walk into an arcade. And the problem with the music here is that it sounds too similar to other fighting games. Like, it almost sounds like Street Fighter to me. And while the sound of the rings and everything might give you an idea of what it is, I think you'd be disappointed to find a Sonic fighting game more than just, you know, Sonic in the arcade. So the game does have a pretty good roster. You got Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles, of course, but you also got Fang the Sniper, or Knack the Weasel, Bean and Bark making their really only appearance. You also got Espio and Amy, so pretty good lineup all things considered. I'm going to be Sonic though, because of course. First up, a match with the Rad Red, why not? Goombala! So the game uses a fighting system similar to Virtua Fighter and Fighting Vipers, in that you really only have two buttons. You have a punch, you have a kick, and you also have a button to block, which is barriers. However, you can only block for so long. Once your barrier craps out, you can't block anymore, so you gotta use that sparingly. And there are moves that you can, special moves you can do through button inputs. Like, in order to do the spin dash, you just push down and do the attack button, like you would in a regular Sonic game, so that much works. But it does ultimately lead to kind of a shallow fighting game. Like, my preference for a fighting game is the 6-button format from Street Fighter, because I feel, while a lot of people would assume that would be overcomplicated, it's actually very easy to understand. 6 buttons, 6 different attacks. By limiting your attacks to just punches and kicks, there's less you have to do, less you can do right out of the gate. So, like with the 6-button format, you start with the 6 buttons, so you learn what attacks do what, but then you realize that if you push it in conjunctions with movement on the joystick, you get different attacks, so you learn that, and then with different movements and combinations, you get special attacks. So it's designed so you naturally learn it, but with a 2-button setup, you sort of skip the input part and just kind of have to go into button combinations and everything, so in my opinion, it kind of makes it more complicated, if that makes sense. It's kind of hard for me to sort of express, and as I cover more fighting games, I'll probably talk more about that, but this definitely isn't the most robust fighting system I've played. Like, really, for these first 2 fights, you can just get by just mashing the punch button. I'm really just doing stuff like the spin dash and everything, just to add a little bit of flair. Though, again, the presentation here is top-notch. These character models are great, and that's really animated. Look at that reflection on the floor. Look at that background. This looks fantastic for the time period. The kind of thing that you could only have in the arcades. It's a shame that the game itself isn't better. I love the stretch and squish on the characters, too. It's great. Little. I think I'm doing more damage to him on Tiny. It does feel good to knock someone out, though. What do you think of that, Bark? Yeah, it's weird how there's 8 Chaos Emeralds, aren't there? Mushroom Hill, why not? Yeah, I know I'm definitely spamming the spin dash, but what else am I gonna do? Ah man, that was a turnaround for Espio, that's for sure. Ah, stupid chameleon. Well, I'd say that's as good a place as any to call it. Alright, so Sonic the Fighters. This is another game that a lot of people tend to refer to as one of the worst games of the series. Though, much like Sonic R, it's not that bad. If you've played something like Fighting Vipers or Virtua Fighter, it is going to feel very familiar. But, again, there just isn't a whole lot to it as a result. Like, the combat in it is just very specific, with a lot of the special moves being dictated by button combinations and stuff like that, rather than, you know, the stuff you would have in Street Fighter. But the graphics are good. The music, while not distinct in the slightest, you know, it does make for a fun fighting game. And it can be fun to mess around with friends. So it's not the worst Sonic game out there, but it is one of the weaker ones in the series. And that pretty much does it for Sonic's time in the 32-bit era. And to be fair, most of these games aren't that bad. Knuckles Chaotix, it's average at best, mediocre at worst. Sonic 3D Blast on the Sega Saturn actually is an improvement on the Genesis game. Sonic Jam was probably cool at the time, but just wasn't what Sonic needed at the time. Sonic R, it's bad, but it's the good kind of bad. And Sonic Fighters, it's bad too, but it's the good kind of bad. It's just one of those weird oddity. They're just two weird oddities in the series. That's a good word for it, oddities. I don't recommend really any of these games unless you can pick them up for cheap. But if you're a Sonic fan like me, you want to say you played them all, go ahead, check them out. I'm sure you'll have fun with it. But anyway, that's going to do it for tonight, guys. If you enjoyed tonight's content, please like and subscribe. I know tonight's video was a little scatterbrained, especially with my headphones going bad, but I think it could have been worse. If you guys are unfamiliar with my channel, I do these videos every week, Saturday at 8 o'clock, and basically what I do is I pick a video game and I play it for an hour, and I just talk about the general design, stuff like that. I don't play games from start to finish because I want to encourage people to actually play the games instead of just watching other people play it, because I feel like you lose something if you consume games in that manner, though I hold nothing against people who do choose to consume games in that manner. I just want to change that. But anyway, I hope you guys have a good night and that you'll join me next week. And as always, the awkward bit of turning off the stream.